Okay, so we're going to start right now. Erev Tov. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Shivtei TED Talks, Haggadah Insights. We have a very exciting program ahead for you. A number of speakers. Everyone's going to speak for exactly not 1 second more for 5 minutes. And if you don't hold to it, you're going to get cut off because some people here even have anniversaries to celebrate tonight. So first of all, I want to thank Mayor Valman for helping to organize the program. Thank you, Mayor. And this follows upon what was a phenomenal TED Talk that we had. It was already a week and a half this flash about at Shul, TED Talks from the park members of the park Minyanim. It was a very special talk. So let me just, by way of introduction, this is really a special Pesach, a different Pesach than previous Pesachs. We've been thrown for a real whirlwind, and that means that perhaps we're able to see Pesach for the first time again this Pesach, and to experience it and see it with fresh eyes, and to relish sitting around the table with family and with friends, and to appreciate all of the different customs and minhagim and texts that we study and learn together. So we have an amazing list of speakers this evening. I'm going to first introduce Rabbanit Etta, who's going to speak first, and then she's going to go take care of our kids who are running around the band in the house. So, Tov, with no further ado, Rabbanit Etta, look forward to hearing your Dvar.
Hi, everyone. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, is that working? Great. Okay, my 5 minutes begin now. Everyone, deep breath, wherever you are, wherever you're coming in from. You know, some of you have those background screens that look like everything's perfect behind you. Can we just acknowledge that it's not, that it's pre-Pesach time? Okay, so this is my clean wall over here. It's really nice. God willing, one day I'll also have an area of books somewhere here. But anyway, let's just acknowledge that this is pre-Pesach. And life is hectic, okay? So breathe that in. Baruch Hashem, we are working. Actually, let me see your body language of like gnut, of sadness, of shame. Everybody, show me your sadness, your shame face, because this is where we're starting from. Show me your sadness, your shame face. Okay, very good. Now show me your shevach, your praise, your gratitude, your presence. Show me your stature. Yes, everybody, let's see that. Yeah. Yes, we are going for the Shevach. Okay, anyway, that was our warm up for tonight. Baruch Hashem, we are all here. It's so nice to be here, my Shivtei family. Okay, we are going to begin. I am curious about this fifth cup. This fifth cup that we're supposed to pour. Does anyone here not open their door for Eliyahu by any chance? I suppose everyone does, but does anyone here not? Or does anyone here not even pour a fifth cup, perhaps? Because if you didn't, you actually would not be incorrect. Why do we have this fifth cup? And how did Eliyahu even become part of our Seder? This is what I want to explore with you very briefly. So the Mishnah, of course, says in Pesachim, and by the way, kol hakavod to all of those who completed their siyum on Pesachim. Woo! You're listening live or in other time. Kol hakavod. Okay, so our Chazal taught us that, of course, we have 4 cups. But there's one girsa, there's one addition that actually, so most, just to catch everybody up, the Mishnah tells us that we have 4 cups. We are supposed to drink 4 cups. Everybody knows that, right? And the 4 cups are supposed to, in many ways, represent certain things. But one thing is the 4 Lashonot Geula. Okay, the 4 expressions of redemption. V'hotzeti v'tzalti, ve'ga'alti, ve'lakachti. Excellent, very good job. So we have 4 cups. But there's another girsa, there's another edition that we see from the Rif. The Rif, who's a posek from about the 11th century, Rabbi Yitzchak Alfasi, who says that there was actually a 5th cup of wine, and that one would recite the Hallel Haggadah over the 5th cup of wine. That was the opinion of Rabbeinu Tarfon, of Rabbi Tarfon. So what do we do with this? What do we do with this opinion? Well, Rashi, there's 3 different opinions about this. Rashi and Tosfot come and say, no, thank you. No, there are only 4 cups at the Seder night. It's forbidden to drink a 5th. The statement of Rabbi Tarfon must be a misprint. It must be an error of the text, or the Talmud should be amended accordingly. 4 cups, that's it, and then you're cut off, okay? The Rambam says, no, there is a 5th cup, but it is optional. It's not obligatory. So, for example, the importance of buying enough wine to have for 4 cups, it ensures to fill the 4 cups, those obligation, but the 5th is permitted, but it's not compulsory. So those who wish to drink a 5th cup can do so, and then can recite the Hallel Haggadah, which one explanation is the Hodu Lashem Ki Tov Ki Olam Chasdo, that whole Hallel Haggadah. There's another contemporary of the Rambam named the Ravid, and the Ravid actually says, it's actually more than obligatory. It's actually more than just optional. It's a mitzvah. It is a mitzvah to drink this 5th cup and to say Hallel Haggadah. So wait a minute, what do? We have the Rashi. We have Rashi who says don't drink it. We have the Rambam who says it's okay, you can. And we have the Ravid who says you should. It's praiseworthy to do. So what do we do when we have 3 different opinions? We compromise. We have a pshara, we have some sort of a compromise. So inevitably, what do? We pour a 5th cup, but we don't drink it. But it's not mentioned anything about Eliyahu. How does Eliyahu appear? So one explanation given by the Vilna Gaon in the 18th century says that actually, when this whole commentary, this what do we do about this 5th cup? One response is teku. What is teku? Teku, apparently, I just learned recently, is actually like a contemporary, like a modern Israeli phrase that kids use, but it's from the Talmud. It basically stands for Tishbi Taretz Kushiyot Ve'Bayot. Tishbi, Eliyahu Hanavi, Tishbi Hagiladi is going to come, and Eliyahu will sort us out. Eliyahu will tell us what we do. So this is one explanation. So coming into some of the drush of this, in a time of uncertainty, Eliyahu represents this not knowing, the longing for an answer, the longing for clarity, the longing for what is not there. We lift 4 glasses, yes, to represent the 4 expressions of redemption, but what about this 5th? Teku. What about this 5th? There's actually a 5th Lashon Geula, Veheveti, that Hashem will bring us. Hashem will bring us to Eretz Yisrael, will bring us to redemption. All of us. And are we there yet? I mean, some of us are, but we're still longing. We're still longing for the Geula. We're yearning for what is not here. And so Eliyahu is symbolic on the one hand of what we are missing. Looking around us at the Seder table, I encourage us, think of those who you would love to be with, who are not there, those whom you miss. Now, just as Eliyahu, however, represents the not knowing, represents the longing, there's so much room also for hoping. There is so much room for the gratitude of now. And in fact, the earliest mention of Eliyahu coming to the Seder, in the 18th century, from Rabbi Yehuda ben Shimon Ashkenazi, in the Be'eret Heitev, who says that, quotes the Chok Yaakov, who says, in these countries, yes, an additional cup is poured, that 5th cup, and it's called Kos Eliyahu, the Kos Shel Eliyahu Hanavi. But why? Why? So this beautiful explanation of Rashi comes to explain using a pasuk from Yechezkel. Now, Yechezkel starts off with such dreary pain. It's a prophecy that begins with just like the description of a creation of a nation it's compared to like a baby who's abandoned, chas v'shalom. But then, va'e'evor alayich va'erech, mitbosset b'damayich va'omer lach b'damayich hayai, va'omer lach b'damayich hayai. Hashem will pass over her and take her in and care for her and say, by your blood you will live. By your blood you will live. So Rashi says, Abba. So Rashi says that you will actually, what is this that you will live? It's through two things. Through doing the Korban Pesach and Brit Milah. This is that blood. Okay? And so, what does this mean? This alludes to the fact that Eliyahu will be present at both the Korban Pesach and at Brit Milah. Isn't that amazing? So just as Eliyahu represents a time of not knowing and solving mysteries, he represents gratitude and hoping, and yes, even redemption, because if you think about it, think about like secular Jews, for example, who may not observe Shabbat or, really know anything, know what even Purim is, for example, but if a baby boy is born, they'll do a Brit Milah. And at the Seder table, they'll sit down, they'll eat from this Korban, they'll eat the Seder table. It is an amazing eternal presence that Eliyahu Hanavi has. And in these times, when we validate, it's a time when we validate and recognize our commitment to our covenant, to Hashem and our people. Eliyahu comes to witness and be a part of the miracles, to gently hold us and hug us and say, you are here and I am here and we are here and we will be here. This represents the embrace the presence, even the uncertainty, and longing for the hope and praying for the future of redemption. I really want to encourage everyone here, when it's time to pour, okay, a cost for Eliyahu. There's certain different customs that people already have. And just to acknowledge that, when you're pouring that fourth cup for yourself and you're pouring for Eliyahu, maybe each person can pour a little bit. And in that, take a moment to consider at your Seder table, what am I longing for? And what am I so grateful for? And what am I hoping for? What am I hoping for? And as you open that door, please God, may we all open the door to our hearts and just come to a place of joy and gratitude and togetherness. Okay, missing you, lots of love, and Chag Sameach. Okay, there's an echo there.
Okay, let's continue on. Thank you so much, Rabbanit Etta, for beautiful, beautiful Torah. We continue with Eitan and Elana Phillips. I just want to mention that Eitan and Elana are celebrating their anniversary tonight. So, Siman Tov u'Mazel Tov to Eitan and Elana. I can't imagine you want to be anywhere else but giving a shiur tonight on Zoom, on the Seder. This is how you celebrate together, and we're here to celebrate with you. So, Mazel Tov. And Eitan, I only see you right now on, so I'm going to ask you to share the next Torah.
Yeah, Lana's trying to get your kid to sleep so we could go out, but we'll try and get something. Okay, so I have a question that has stayed. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. I've had a question that has stayed with me that I heard when I was in school, and that has stayed with me since then. And my suggestion is that you can raise it with your children, your grandchildren. And it's a very simple question, but a deep question that gets to the heart of Pesach. And that is, we're going to be sitting down on Motzei Shabbat. Yeah, it's a bit strange, but we're going to be sitting down on Motzei Shabbat to celebrate our freedom, our cherut. But we're not free on Seder night. What happened in Mitzrayim that night? They're still sitting in Egypt. And yeah, okay, they're going to go out, in the night. They're going to leave. But already on the last day of Pesach, they're going to be chased by the Egyptian army on the border. So, we're saying, oh, we're free, we're Bnei Chorin. We're leaning, we're celebrating, we're kings of freedom. They're sitting in the middle of Egypt. Nothing's happened yet. What are we celebrating? We're sitting in the middle of our suffering, in our slavery. It's like, to celebrate, I don't need to bring an example, but celebrating in the middle of suffering. We should really, Pesach should be, Seder night should be on the last night. We should be leading up to the last day. The last day should be Yetziat Mitzrayim, Yam Suf, Kriyat Yam Suf, Cherut, freedom. That should be, in my eyes, and the question that was given to me by my rabbi. He never gave us an answer and left us with this question throughout our lives. And I've been trying to answer it. And I suggest that you ask this question to your children and grandchildren, because I think it's a really good question. What's the answer? Okay, I'll try and give my suggestion, but the question, I think, as we know on a Seder night, is more important than the answer. My suggestion is that Seder night, A, it's about the Korban Pesach, but B, what is the Korban Pesach all about? And I think it's the first time that the Jewish people did something for their own freedom. It's the first time the Jewish people start believing in their own freedom. They take the Egyptian god, one of the symbols, a holy symbol in Egyptian culture, and they slaughter it before the eyes of the Egyptian people. Until this point, God did everything. God did everything. Bnei Yisrael did nothing, almost nothing. But this is the first time they do something for their own freedom and they start believing in their own freedom. And that explains, by the way, why the first mitzvah that the Jewish people ever get, which has always been a perplexing question, is the Chodesh, right? Such a, this is before they get this mitzvah, they get the Chodesh, which is also another element of this same idea that you guys need to take part in creation, in declaring when the Chodesh is going to be, when the Chagim is going to be. I'm doing this Yetzias Mitzrayim, I did all the plagues, but really, Am Yisrael, this is for you to take part in. And when Bnei Yisrael start believing in their own freedom, that's when we celebrate freedom. It doesn't matter when you actually become free. Yeah, there's still a journey to be. We're going to be chased down by the Egyptians. Life is still going to be complicated. But freedom, real chayot, starts in Mitzrayim, in the middle of slavery, but when you start believing, when Bnei Yisrael start believing. And I think it's domeh to the situation that we're in right now. A lot of people say, how can you celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut? All these different things. It's not the Gula Shlema. We still have so much to go. Look at the terrible things that are around us. Look at the Yom Chirot, when everyone is mlachlech achad l'sheni. Everyone's talking badly about each other. But that's exactly what I think the idea of Chirut really is, of freedom, of understanding what I think Ben Gurion managed to do in the midst of a war. A war was about to take place, but we believe that Chirut is the idea to start believing in our own freedom. And for me, it's mamash, like, just the last thing I'm going to say is that the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was mamash Erev Pesach. Just when we did in the temple times, we would have been slaughtering the Korban Pesach. So this idea of taking the Egyptian god, slaughtering it in front of their eyes, this visceral metaphor almost, is the same. It parallels the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising happening exactly the same time, because it's a time when they started to believe that they're going to fight, that they're going to take their own freedom into their own hands. And I believe that Seder night is a special night. So yeah, again, the question is better than the answer, but I pass over to Elana.
Thank you, Eitan. Thank you, Kol HaKavod. And Elana, before you start, I do just want to thank Eitan and Elana for everything they've done for our youth these last few months. They came in the thick of COVID, and they've gotten to know the kids and have done an amazing program with them. And Youth Minyan is busting at the seams. And so they've been really, really successful with their hands behind their back. So kol hakavod to you guys. And please God, we'll continue to grow the Youth Minyan and the youth activities at Shul over the next few months. Okay, b'chavod, Elana.
Thank you, Rabbi Eitan. It makes it easier when we have such great kids, I must say. So it's really been amazing the last few months being part of this community. I wanted to speak a bit about the verse Hisha Amda, which really took on a new meaning for me after my trip to Poland. I'll continue a little bit about on the same note as Eitan ended off, but when I went on my trip to Poland, we sang that song quite a lot. And it was a very challenging song for me to sing. And if I'll highlight the end of the song, which says, Hakadosh Baruch Hu Matzilenu Mi Adam. And when I was in Poland, sitting in these, gas chambers and seeing these horrible things, I was like, no, Hashem didn't save us Mi Adam. And like that Pesach also was just hard for me to say, like, I don't know, I went right before Pesach, so like I connected and I was just like, we can't say this, it's just not true. And it was really, really challenging for me. And I was at the end of high school. And I think that I got my answer from a song, The Last Seder in the Ghetto Varsha. And in the song, it's a really powerful song. I won't play it now if anyone has time after to listen to it. It's a very powerful song. And it's a little boy, Moshe, asking his father, will I be alive next year to sing the Manishtana? And his father answers him, I don't know if you're going to be alive, but they will be somewhere out there, Sham, some Moshe that's going to sing the Manishtana. And for me, that was, okay, this. He had so much Emunah there in Ghetto Varsha. And like now sitting at my Seder here in Eretz Yisrael, I realized we went through so much persecution, the Jews, through so much hardship, but at the end, we're still here. We're singing the Manishtana. Our kids are singing the Manishtana. This is what it means. Hashem atzilatana mi'adam. We went through so much and so much persecution, but Am Yisrael is still very much alive. And more so is that our Seders, being in Eretz Yisrael and being with a state and so powerful and strong as we are as a nation at the moment, and really feeling the Geula in front of our eyes, just makes our Seder, I feel like, gives it so much more meaning. We really could understand what this concept of Geula is. We came from the Ghetto Varsha not so long ago. My great grandmother was there and telling her that I'm sitting in Eretz Yisrael having a Seder is like, it's incredible. And I could really relate and resonate. We say B'chol dor v'dor, we should experience that we were as if we were taken out of Egypt, because Ki'ilu nigalnu, and we really went, Hashem, he brought us back. And I feel like being in Eretz Yisrael and having our Seders here and living in this amazing country really makes it, I guess, more real of like, what is this Geula that we went through, and we really can feel it. And hopefully we really should all be zoche for the full Geula and be able to share with our kids that excitement and joy we have that through the Geula we're going through today. You're on mute, of Eitan. Still on mute, I think.
Rabbi, you're still on mute.
Okay, I was just saying, Elana, Eitan, thank you so much for these beautiful Divrei Torah. And we wish you both Chag Kasher V'Sameach. You're patur from the rest of the program. You're to take care of little Yakir, and you have things to prepare for. But it's great to have you guys on. You're welcome to stay on, of course, but no pressure. Okay, next, Rav Dani and Sonya. It's great to have you on here. I see you guys are dressed up for the Seder. Rav Dani, I remember you wearing a kittel also at Purim, so now I'm really confused. Is it Purim? Is it Pesach? What is this kittel that we're wearing here? But just seeing the props there on your table, it's getting us excited for Pesach. And before Rav Dani and Sonya speak, just want to thank you both for everything that you've done for our community this last year, these last 12 months of Corona, the shiurim, the programming, the chesed, the leadership. Really appreciate your investment and your mesirut nefesh for our community. So with no further ado, the chavod of Dani and Sonya.
Thank you. I'll go first. His kittel is really an all year round from Yom Kippur as well, of course, so it carries him.
Also, in true Zoom fashion, you have no idea what I'm wearing, below the kittel area.
Right.
Yeah, Ashkenazim never give up a chance to think about death and and morbidity. It's so really this is very uplifting. Keep going. Yeah.
Right. Yes, and this is our Seder because everyone who knows us over the last 10 years, we're the big wine drinkers here. So of course we have wine at our table here with you. So thank you for including us in tonight's TED Talks. Okay, so as we know, one of the primary mitzvot of Pesach is the biblical mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, the retelling of the Exodus story. And this mitzvah of telling over the story on the first night of Pesach comes from two different biblical sukkim, one of which is V'yigadet levincha bayom hahu lemor, that you should relate this narrative over to your child on this day. And the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim is really the backbone of the whole Seder experience. And it's what a lot of our customs are based on, right? That is Seder night. And really this particular pasuk of V'yigadet levincha It's what teaches us that the whole Seder is really in the format of this question and answer structure. And we learn from this that on Seder night, parents are meant to be giving this information over to their children. And even if there are no children present at the Seder at all, we still have the format of this Haggadah that guides us on this night, question and answer, that replicates this experience like a parent would be teaching over to a child. Like we said, question and answer. And on one hand, we see from this that there's a huge emphasis on this concept of Mesorah, the passing down from parent to child, from generation to generation. And that's something that we see. But I heard another beautiful explanation that relates to this idea of why the structure is this way, like from parent to child. And I thought it was beautiful. And that's that even if there's no child present at the Seder, even if it's only us sitting alone at the Seder table, we still read the Haggadah and experience the Seder in this way, because there's something to be learned from the way that a child experiences life. There's something special on that. And on Seder night, the mitzvah is to truly experience the slavery and to truly experience the Exodus. But as we all know, when we age and we get older, part of us often becomes closed and rigid and jaded in a sort of sense. And there's something just about a child's curiosity and openness and excitement that we're all meant to be tapping into and all meant to be bringing along with us on that night, regardless of how old we are. So with this in mind, I just want to briefly comment on the section of the Arba Banim, the 4 sons, that we read in the Haggadah. And Rabbi Shmuel Golden, in his excellent Haggadah, it's called Unlocking the Haggadah, I highly recommend this book. He talks about, he explains that according to him, the Haggadah follows a sort of Seder of its own. And it's in this question and answer format that guides us, and it ultimately helps us tap into this historical awareness and connection and this experiential sort of scene. And it goes through this format. But according to him, the Haggadah also includes something that he calls digressions or pauses that are there to sort of stop from the historical aspect of the Seder text and are there to help us ensure that we're maximizing the Seder experience. They're there to sort of help us focus and utilize what we can to really upgrade our Seder. And according to him, the Arba Banim, he explains, is one of those pauses. He says it's where the rabbis inserted this chance to sort of pause from doing the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim and to reflect on how we're doing the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. And so he says it's sort of like to put aside the process and text of the historical part of the Seder and to just look around and connect with who's sitting around us at the table in this moment. And that's sort of what we see through the text of the 4 sons, where it goes and it describes different kinds of people and different kinds of perspectives and how those people need to connect and learn. And in that moment, we sit here and we assess the people around our own table and we say, who are these people? Who are they to me? What are they like? What are their needs? Right? Because if this Seder is meant to be an experience, if we're meant to, it's meant to be felt and it's meant to be processed, right? So we have to sit here and say, how can I make sure that it's mat'im and relevant to the people who are sitting here around me and to me, myself included? How can I ensure that? Are we just going through the motions, going through literally the text, or are we experiencing? Are we connecting? And so this, he says, is really the purpose of the Arba Banim. Sorry, hold on a second. And this is really the purpose of the Arba Banim, to help us do this, okay? And well, the section is clearly meant to help us enhance our Seder experience, right? To him, that's what he says is the point. I'd like to suggest that this eye-opening lesson of the concept of Arba Banim can really help us in our everyday lives as well. There are so many people, especially parents of school-age children, who have really felt like this last year, this Corona year, has been sort of this wasted experience, this wasted opportunity. There's been no school, there's been no structure, there's been no normalcy. So it feels like it's all sort of a waste, right? There's no opportunity for learning or growth or connection at all. Really, what was the point? What have we accomplished? But I'd like to put out there an offer. I'd like to suggest that perhaps we can take a moment and look at this last year like this pause, like this concept of the section of the Arba Banim, that yes, this year was certainly challenging, and it definitely had its inconveniences. And it's true that our children did not learn certain things in their formal classrooms because of certain disruptions. But in other ways, I'd like to say that this year has also been an opportunity. It's really been an opportunity to pause within the structure of the Seder of our own lives. And it's really been a moment to just pause and to take stock of our lives, of our world, of ourselves, of our children, of our loved ones, of our friends. It's really been a chance to spend a little bit more time, or to be honest, a lot more time with ourselves, and in the case of young families, with our children. And just as we know we can't run a successful Seder and connect with our kids on that night if we can't truly see them and acknowledge them for who they are, right? Just like we learned from the section of the Arba Banim, that's what it's coming in that moment to teach us. Who are these kids? What are their learning mechanisms? What do they need from me? How do they connect, right? Just like in the Seder, we can't connect with them if we don't acknowledge that. So too in life, we can't connect with them and help them if we don't fully know them, if we don't fully understand them. And that means the beauties and the quirks of their personalities, and what they like and what they don't like, and what they need and what makes them tick. And ultimately, I believe that that is something that this last year had the potential to offer us. Life still has the potential to offer us, but this last year particularly really has it had the opportunity to offer us this if we let ourselves just look back and reflect on the experiences beyond the hardships, beyond the inconveniences, which are real, beyond it, to find and to store away some of that deeper awareness and some of the deeper knowledge of who we've discovered our children to be. And I think that Bezrat Hashem, if we can allow ourselves a few minutes before Seder night to do that, then God willing, we can use those insights and those deeper connections at this year's Seder to hopefully bring us together and connect more deeply to the content and to each other. Wishing you all a Chag Kasher V'Sameach.
Thank you so much, Sonya, and b'chavod Rav Dani.
Okay, thank you. I'll take the baton. And actually, to go off of what Sonya was talking about, the Seder is really a series of questions and answers that are supposed to take place between parents and children, or between colleagues at the table. And one of the most interesting insights that I remember from a very, very long time ago that I learned, that I say it almost every single Seder, has to do with the very first question and answer that we have in the Haggadah. The first questions that we have in the Haggadah are the four questions, Ma nishtana. And the answer that the father gives to the son is Avadim Hayinu L'Paro B'Mitzrayim. And I want to take a look at this section and just ask a fundamental question. The section says, Avadim Hayinu L'Paro B'Mitzrayim, V'yotzeinu Hashem Elokeinu Misham B'yad Chazaka V'zorah Netuyah. And then something astonishing. V'ilu lo tzei HaKadosh Baruch Hu et Avoteinu Mitzrayim, Harei anu uvanenu uvnei vanenu mishu avadim hayinu l'paro b'Mitzrayim. If Hashem had not taken us out of Mitzrayim, if Hashem had not taken our fathers out of Mitzrayim, then we and our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren would still be in Mitzrayim to this day. Now, this is an astonishing statement. What does it even mean? Why in the world would you think that time does not stand still? History does not remain static. People do not stay in the same place. Why would we still, to this day, be in Mitzrayim? It's just a weird phrase to put right at the beginning, that the child should get up and start screaming at the father. That makes no sense. So I'd like to offer a couple of insights. One, as I said before, one that I've known about for a very long time, and that's an insight from the Khatam Sofer. So the Khatam Sofer of Moshe Schreiber, an old ancestor of my family's, so he offers a brilliant point through a careful reading of the section. It actually is very interesting because the section starts with Avadim Hayinu L'Paro B'Mitzrayim, we were slaves to Paro Mitzrayim, and it says Vayotzienu, we were taken out. But then all of a sudden it says V'ilu lo tzadi Kadosh Baruch Hu et Avotenu min Mitzrayim. If Hashem had not taken out our fathers from Mitzrayim, this is strange because there's a tension between the pronouns over here. Is it us who were enslaved in Mitzrayim, or is it our fathers who were enslaved in Mitzrayim? So the Khatam Sofer very quickly just says both. He says, when we say Avadim Hayinu, the Paro b'Mitzrayim, Who is he talking about? He's talking about us as the Jews, the first generation that were enslaved in Mitzrayim. But when he changes to Ilu Lotzi Kadosh Baruch Hu et Avotenu, he's not talking about the ones who were enslaved. He's talking about Avotenu. Who's the Avotenu? Who's the first Av? That's Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu spent time in Mitzrayim. He wasn't enslaved in there, but he was in Mitzrayim. And the Khatam Sofer says over here, this is a case of Maaseh Avot Siman Avanim. Avram went down to Mitzrayim and was stuck there for a little bit. But then HaKadosh Baruch Hu took him out, in fact, Beruchush Gadol. He took a lot of gifts from Paro, and this informed and created the reality that would exist for his descendants, for Bnei Yisrael leaving Mitzrayim. And so we're not talking about us being enslaved forever, but the fact was that if Avram hadn't been taken out of Mitzrayim, then his descendants would not have been taken out of Mitzrayim in the same fashion. It all came from the power of Avram being taken out. That's one idea. And a different idea, I think along a completely different line, the Rabbanit, he says, what was the point of all of the makot? All of the makot in Mitzrayim, why did Hashem have to hit Paro over the head so many times? And the Rabbanit says, the point of it was to show how rigidly and how iron-willed Paro was. Paro wasn't stam a dictator, stam a king that would wilt in the face of just a little bit of pressure. No. Hashem had to hit him with 10 makot before he budged even a little bit, and even then it was with reluctance. Only because he was afraid for his very life. He saw that all of the other firstborn were dying, and he said, I'm going to die next. I've seen that this is what's going to happen. And a ruler like that, he would never have let us go out of his own free will. Never, ever. And so Hashem was showing us that was the only way it was going to happen, was if Hashem actually pulled us out by force. But one final idea, and I think that this takes on new light in terms of recent events, and I'm not talking about coronavirus, I'm talking about other events. Is it really possible for a people to be enslaved for generations upon generations, for years, for hundreds of years, for thousands of years? And the answer is actually yes. The Dalit, which is Sanskrit, which actually means the broken or the scattered, it's a reference to the untouchables, which is a whole caste, or a non-caste really, in India. These are people who have had a certain status, or as I said before, a non-status, in India for thousands of years, literally thousands of years. These people have been, if not enslaved, have been at the very bottom of the social strata, the very bottom of the ladder, and there's almost no way for them to pull themselves up. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people that have been this way for thousands of years. So it's not impossible to imagine that we would be this way. And I think this is important to think about, because as we consider what the real emotion that we're meant to feel on Seder night, I think that emotion is gratitude. And the gratitude that we're meant to feel is beheref ayin. In the blink of an eye, we went from being an enslaved people to the greatest superpower in the world, to being completely free. And that was all to the help of Haggadah Baruch Hu. How many other people are there in the world that, for whatever reason, I'm not going to get into the theology of it, did not have the benefit of this geula, the benefit of being pulled out of that slavery by God? Thinking about people that live in my own home country, and again, I don't want to get into the politics in particular, but certain members of minority communities that feel, justifiably so, that they're being held down, and they feel that there is no way for them to get out. And I'm not trying to create some kind of political message. I'm not saying we have to bang from the gavel, from the judge's bench, or some kind of polemic, or that we have to put some kind of object on the table to remind us of the oppressed people in the rest of the world. In fact, the inverse. I think that we simply need to discuss and think and reflect and be aware about our luck, our fortune, that we had and we have a creator of the world that for whatever reason decided that we are his chosen people and he needs to take care of us. And we need to reflect on that and consider to ourselves that what that demands of us is that we each carry with us a torch of Torah and mitzvot that we carry around the world and light it up to make it into a better world. And that's the ultimate message that we have to think about on the night of the Seder. Chag kasher v'sameach.
Okay, thank you, Reb Dani. Beautiful ideas. We move on to our next speaker, to Ian Klotnik. Where is Ian? Is Ian on here? Hello, Ian. Looks like you're out there. I don't know, on the western, out west in the Colorado or Utah. It looks like, or maybe you're in the Negev by Eilat.
Jericho.
You're by Jericho. Okay. So it's very light outside by you right now. But Mayor also seems to be in a beautiful pasture there as well. So Ian, it's great to have you on. I'm sure many of you, all of you know Ian. Ian ran the educational committee for a number of years. And so Ian, it's great to see you again. Ian's been a regular at the Laskov Minyan, but he'll of course be coming back to Shivtei very soon as things come back. So I see Grant Leboff is also smiling. So we're Ian, with no further ado, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for sharing some words of Torah.
So thank you very much for inviting me. I'm a little bit humbled to be speaking with such accomplished speakers, but I'll give it my best shot. It's quite a deep idea, so I hope I give it justice. It was touched on, some parts of the idea was touched on before, and I'll just go right into it. Basically, Haggadah, and it goes on to its long expounding of Arami Oved Avi and the rest of the psukim done for Bikurim, but it starts off Arami Oved Avi Vayered Mitzrayim Vayagor Sham Bimtei Ma'at Vayisham L'Goy Gadol Atzum Barav. I'll just jump to the end part of the Midrashim there, where it says Vayisham L'Goy Gadol. Haggadah says Melamed Shayitzel Mitzuyan Le'Stureat, and then it says Gadol V'Atzum. K'ma shene'emar V'nei Yisrael Paru Vayishutzu Vayibu Vayatzumu B'mod Me'od. Basically referring to the fact that they grew massively in number. And then the part that I want to focus on is Varav, and it quotes Rabbanit Etta touched on it. She said that the Haggadah mentions, כמה שנאמר, רבה כצמח השדה נתתיך, ותרבי ותגדלי ותבוא בעדי ידיים, שעדיין נכון הוא צריך צמח, את עירום ואריה. Basically, Am Yisrael is compared to a young lady that had no clothing because they had no mitzvot. And then the Midrash says, how did they become Rav? What does Rav mean? Rav here has to mean great, because it can't mean many in number. We've just said that there were many in number. It has to mean they became great. How did they become great? I saw you covered in your bloods. I said that through your bloods, and I emphasize it, it's plural bloods. You'll live, and those are psukim from Yecheskel that the Haggadah is bringing as to explain the Torah. And the pasuk from the Torah, and as Rashi mentions there, it's talking about the two mitzvot of Korban Pesach and Brit Milah. So now let's look at this a little bit more deeply, because firstly, like an intriguing fact is that those are the only two positive mitzvot that one incurs karet if one doesn't fulfill them, which implies the corollary that if they are fulfilled, there's karet, meaning your life is shortened to some whatever means it's a machloket, but the corollary would mean that your life is lengthened by the fulfillment of those. What does a brit mean? So Rashi has mentioned saying Rav is, what is the mitposses b'damayich? They had two mitzvot, and Brit Milah and Korban Pesach. So Brit comes from two different explanations. One is Bria, which is a different creation, and that's Hebrew, and also Aramaic. Bar means outside or different. It's a different category. So Brit is a creation, a new creation. When two people enter, Brit covenant is a really poor translation. It's a different entity that's created, and even more an entity, a Brit that's made with Hashem. We see by Abraham when Hashem said to have the Brit Milah, to become Shalem, you would become perfect with the Brit Milah. What does it mean to become perfect? Become Shalem. It means without any flaws. When you have no flaws, you have no defects, then there's nothing that can bring you down. So effectively, it brings you to the level of eternity. Abraham would become eternal. And we can see, therefore, why that is greatness, why that's referred to as greatness. Brit Milah eternity, there's no greater thing than eternity or infinity. But how does that connect to Korban Pesach? That's a little bit more difficult. So the Sefer Yetzirah, which is one of the first Kabbalistic works, mentions that on the human body there's actually two britot. There's a brit ha'maor and a brit ha'lashon. Brit ha'maor coming from lashon or, which is skin, or flesh, and that's obviously referring to the circumcision. But what's brit ha'lashon? So that lashon meaning language or tongue. So that has many ramifications. One of them is obviously lashon hara. But for us, it has a specific ramification that I'd like to maybe dwell on, that I thought maybe could connect. No, milah is also a word. So milah is also connected. So when it says, so Sefer Yetzirah didn't kind of, it saw that there was a connection in the structure of the Hebrew milah, not only meaning circumcision, but milah is a word. So the two parts of the body, those are the two parts that interact with the outside world, and through those two parts, we become a new entity. We create this pact with Hashem. Does that relate more specifically to us too? Well, the mitzvah of Magid fulfills the mitzvah of Haggadah, we know, and that's done with our mouths, obviously, with language. We tell the story. Tell, not only meaning to tell, to relate, but also to tell is to determine in English. To tell if something is or something or not. So the words that we use when we're telling them the story of the Exodus of Egypt are fulfilling a deep idea that we are ascertaining, we are connecting to the story of Exodus. And something intriguing about that further is that you can only do that, right, as the Haggadah says, with the Korban Pesach in front of you. So you see that the Korban Pesach itself is almost reliant on the mitzvah of Haggadah, of Magid, of telling the story as well. That they almost are bound together in one and the same thing. And this now gives us a new understanding of the pasuk that we were referring to, that the mitzvah there of Korban Pesach is more like the mitzvah of I'd like to think of it as a mitzvah of Magid, of the Brit of Lashon. So in other words, you have there the two mitzvot, Brit Milah, as actually said, and Brit Korban Pesach, but more importantly, the Korban Pesach, as it sits there in front of you and you tell the story, and you make the story tell for you and for everyone else, you become part of the experience of the Jewish people, the eternal people. And you connect to that eternity, and that's how you become great again. That's how you connect yourself to greatness and to this great people, and it's a great experience on its Rav. It's a great experience on Seder night, and don't forget that as we're doing that, and we have the remnants of the Korban Pesach that stays in our mouth, on our tongues. Don't forget who we invite in on the special night of Pesach, just like we do for Brit Milah, Eliyahu Navi, the Navi of eternity and of.
Okay, Ian, thank you so much for this beautiful, beautiful Dvar Torah. I want to call upon Grant Leboff to deliver the next Dvar Torah. Grant has also been a member of the Laskov Minyan that was right across the street this entire last year. And for those of you, you should really, if you haven't had the chance yet, to go hear Grant on a Shabbat morning, on a Friday night. They come from near and far, all around the Laskov Park to hear Grant give really insightful and thought-provoking Divrei Torah. So Grant, it's great to have you on, and the Chavod, look forward to hearing some words of Torah from you.
Thank you very much for having me, everybody. Good evening. So I just want to touch on an idea about the plagues, because the plagues are so deep and they're so central to everything that we do on Seder. And I can't help but think that often we kind of breeze over them in a 45-second rendition of, Dam Sefadea, Ginan. We just, dip the wine and we kind of move on. And they are so incredibly deep. So if you go to Pirkei Avot, you go to chapter 5 of Pirkei Avot, the first pasuk says, the world was created in 10 utterances. And it was done that in order to punish the wicked and to reward the righteous. And, if you just read that pasuk, it doesn't really make any sense. So you go, well, how does that work? So the idea is we know that there are 10 attributes, sefirot, emanations, if you like, of Hashem. in which he reveals himself, the Ein Sof, the infinite in him. And the idea is that when Hashem created the world, we know that in the evening, and then there was morning. And the idea of there was evening in the creation story is that Hashem has to withdraw, because Hashem is everything. Nothing can exist because Hashem took up everything. So his chesed of creating us was that he had to retract to make room for creation. So there's an idea that every evening, the evening is the void. He retracts, and then every morning he fulfills that void with the next statement of creation, right? So that's how it works. And because Hashem has to retract, every time he retracts, he's slightly more hidden. Of course, the word olam means hidden, all right? So 10 statements, apart from being the emanations, the attributes of Hashem, the idea is that every time Hashem creates, he just retracts a little bit more. And 10 is the idea that he's hidden enough that the wicked can deny him, and he's revealed enough that the righteous can identify with him. And that's the idea of the 10. And then in the next pasuk of Pirkei Avot, it says there were 10 generations from Adam to Noah, right? And one of the ideas behind that is that every generation was meant to reveal and uncover another attribute of Hashem. And of course they failed, and we end up with the flood. But then what happens next? Go to Pirkei Avot again, the next pasuk. There were 10 generations from Noah to Avraham, because they had another chance. Each generation had another chance of revealing an attribute of Hashem, and they failed again. And then we go to the next pasuk in the same chapter, and what does it say? Avraham, our father, had 10 trials, and he withstood them all. Because the idea was that in every trial, Avraham himself uncovered one of the emanations of Hashem, and that was why he was rewarded of being the father of almost all humanity. Everybody would be blessed through him. But then go to the next pasuk in Pirkei Avot, and what does it say? There were 10 miracles wrought for our ancestors in Egypt, and then 10 at the sea. And there's a very deep idea here, because the idea is that every single plague was there to uncover an emanation of Hashem. And actually it goes in reverse order. So if you like, the first plague uncovered the 10th emanation, because remember, creation starts with Bereshit, and then we have to keep working back. So the 10th emanation was uncovered by the plague of blood, and then the 9th by the second plague, and so on and so forth, until we get to the final plague. I haven't got time to go through all of those, but if we get to the final plague, and what do we have? We have Bereshit, which is in the beginning. And what does Hashem do with that 10th plague? He cuts off beginnings. That's what he does. Because what makes people creators? Their firstborn. That's when they become creators. After that, they can have second, third, fourth, fifth children, right? But the point is it's the firstborn that makes them creators. And so Hashem cuts off the firstborn. The firstborn also is the link between the generations. So when he cuts off the firstborn, he cuts off the beginning, because Hashem is everything, and he creates other with the idea of Bereshit, because when it says in the beginning, he creates time in and of itself. And so we have this very, very deep idea that the plagues are an education. The plagues are an uncovering of these emanations of Hashem right through to 10 to 1. And just to understand that, we're told in Midrash Shemot Rabbah that on Moshe's staff was the abbreviation that we always say in the Haggadah that Rav Yehuda says, Tetzach Adash Ba'achav, right? And the reason why that abbreviation is so important is because it groups the plagues in groups of 3, that the 10th one's put on the end, but it groups the plagues in groups of 3. Why? Because each set of 3 was an education. So if you go to the Chumash afterwards, you can have a look just to remind yourself, but every plague, 1, 4, and 7, that was blind, wild creatures and hail, each one, Moshe went down to the Nile to tell Paro about the plague. Why the Nile? Because that's where Paro was at his most vulnerable. Because, the Egyptians treated him like a god, but he wasn't a god, right? He had to do things that human beings needed to do. So he went to the Nile for a morning swim every morning to do that, and then he could be a god, as it were, for the rest of the day. So Moshe tells him about the first set of plagues, 1, 4, and 7, when he's at his most vulnerable, because he wants him to internalize that information, where his worldview as at its at its most vulnerable, as it were. And then what happens with sects 2, 5, and 8, frogs, pestilence, and locusts? 2, 5, and 8 happens, all right, in the palace, because once Pharaoh has learned new information, he has to internalize that in his own world, and his own world is the palace. And then what happens finally with 3, 6, and 9, there is no warning at all, because once the teacher has given you the lesson and you're meant to have internalized it, then you're on your own. And so we see in very, very deep ways that the plagues are an education. They're an education for Hashem to reveal himself to the world through these emanations. And I think that, it's just a nice idea to take in, that this year when we go through the plagues, maybe we'll give it slightly more than the 45 seconds as we dip and move on, because dinner's coming soon, and we can just contemplate that this was Hashem revealing himself in a very deep way to us, the Jewish people, but also the entire world. I wish everybody a Chag Sameach.
Sorry, thank you, Grant. Beautiful, beautiful, deep, very deep Torah. Thank you so much. I'd like to call upon Tammy Levy to deliver the next Dvar Torah this evening. Tammy, I've made you a co-host, right? If I understand correctly, you wanted to share something on the screen. Tammy and Elan Levy have made Aliyah just a few months ago from Johannesburg. And so kol hakavod for making the trek, for making it out here during tough times. And they've got involved in the community teaching. And so Elan was at the Kotel trip this week as well. And so Tammy and Elan, it's great to have you guys here in Ra'anana at Shivtei. And please God, you should continue to teach just like you did in Johannesburg and to share your words of Torah with our community. So with no further ado, Tammy Levy, b'chabad.
Thank you. Thanks, Rabbi Eitan, and thank you for the privilege. I'm just going to test the screen share. I'm a bit out of Zoom practice, believe it or not. One moment. Okay. What? Are you able to see it? Sorry. Anyone able to see it? Okay, I'm not gonna use the screen share there. Were you able to see it, Rabbi Eitan? No.
No, I can see it.
Okay, no worries. Let's go on without it. Okay, so just want to thank the organizers for allowing us all to come and learn together and take a break from our physical preparation for Pesach, and to come and prepare spiritually a little bit for the all-important Pesach Seder. So the idea I want to share this evening, I credit Rabbi Ezra Bick, a teacher of Talmud and Jewish philosophy at Yeshivat Har Etzion. And I'd like to take a look together at a few short psukim that, when studied closely, reveal one aspect of the development of the personality of Moshe Rabbeinu in his being revealed as the leader fit to move Am Yisrael into nationhood. While Shmot, as we know, is really the story of a people rather than of individuals, while we learn about the Exodus story and early nationhood, one cannot ignore the centrality and importance of the study of the life and the greatness of Moshe Rabbeinu. Of our sects about Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, the leader, the liberator, the lawgiver, the man who brought a group of slaves to freedom, turned a first collection of individuals into a nation, and so transformed them that they became the people of eternity. It was Moshe who, with his great leadership style, led this group of downtrodden slaves to their own greatness. And so the episode I'd like to look at is at an early episode, at the episode of the Egyptians striking the Hebrew. The psukim read, "Vayhi b'yamim hahem v'yigdal Moshe v'yetzeh lechav v'yar b'sivlotam v'yar ish mitzri makeh ish ivri me'echav." And it came to pass in those days, when Moshe was grown up, and he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren. Firstly, what is b'yamim hahem? Which days? The previous pasuk says to us, "Vayigdal hayeled v'tiviyeu levat paro vayhi la leven v'tikra shmo Moshe v'tomer ki min hamayim mishitihu." To translate, and the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she called his name Moshe, and said, "Because I drew him out of the water." So surely our verse, the first verse we began with, cannot be referring to the same time period. Rather, the use of the same word, Vayigdal, creates an interesting distinguishing factor. And we have two comments, one of Rashi and one of Ramban, which I'd like to share. Rashi's comment: the first growing is in size, and the second is in position, as Pharaoh appointed him over his house. Ramban comments simply, he grew and became a man. In the previous instance, it says the child grew until he no longer needed to be weaned, and afterwards he grew and became a man of intelligence. And so even though the meaning of the verb is the same, it refers to two different and distinct stages, one in infancy and one much later. So our pasuk in those days would then refer much later to now when Moshe was a grown man. And so as we continue to unpack the verse, the next section tells us that now this now grown man, a man of stature within the Egyptian palace, goes out to his brethren. Vayetze elechav. At first glance, we could be asking, who are these brethren? Well, as we know, he grew up amidst the Egyptian monarchy. But the repetition of the word ve'echav, juxtaposed to the word ivri, suggests to us that this people related back to his brethren, the Hebrews. And in the words of Rabbi Ezra Beck, the Torah reveals what lies behind Moshe's actions. Not curiosity, not only a protest against injustice, not merely a desire to help the persecuted and the weak, but a deep identification with his brethren, with his brothers. He reveals himself as a champion of his own people at this point, to the point that he's prepared to kill on their behalf and thus place his standing and position in Pharaoh's palace and his very life in peril. On the first Vayar, Rashi comments that he, Moshe, prepared his eyes and heart to feel sorry for them. And the second Vayar means to see in the normal sense of the word. The first Vayar, as is attached to the word besilotam, means he looked into their suffering. He applied his understanding, he delved into it, and then he identified. It is not merely to see with one's eyes. Moshe's greatness here is that in those days, i.e., despite the distance created between him and his brethren and the opulence and comfort in which he'd grown up with, so very different to the life of these brethren, Moshe can go out. And when he does go out, he doesn't turn a blind eye and say, it's going to get dirty if I get involved, but rather he applies his heart. He cannot not. He discovers his sense of identity and his innate inability to turn a blind eye to the suffering, and so identifies with his brethren. And again, to quote Rabbi Beck, the last quote, this stirring in Moshe's soul is national identification, not personal ethics and not justice. So according to this reading, this is the plain sense of the verse. I'll add that many later episodes do reveal Moshe's great sensitivity to injustice and his deep sense of morality and ethics. And I think it's relevant that we share this idea tonight, Erev Pesach and Motzei Yom HaBechirot, as the last votes are probably being cast. I had my first opportunity to cast my vote for the leadership of the State of Israel today. What a privilege. And as we exercise our democratic privilege, I thought about a few of the Jewish leaders that we've been privileged to have and have built us as a people. We have a long history of incredible leadership, biblical and other, who've shown magnificent qualities fit to lead Am Yisrael through challenges of different times. And so as we enter this Chag HaCherut and look towards learning from the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu, may we as a nation merit the type of leadership that has this real sense of brotherhood and identification with all of the colors and beautiful flavors that make up Am Yisrael today. A leader we can admire and take example from, just like we could from Moshe Rabbeinu. Bezrat Hashem. And thank you again for this opportunity to share some words.
Okay, thank you so much, Tammy. Just curious, by show of hands, how many people here voted today? Anybody show of hands? Anybody? Okay, looks like a lot of people voted today. Yafem Od. And Tam, you voted with idealism. It's wonderful. I have to say, the fourth time around here in 2 years, not feeling it the same way I may have felt the first time. But please God, we should all maintain this idealism and recognize the blessing in this, even if we have some things that are uncertain at this point in time. So I'd like to call upon our next speaker, Gina Junger, who you all know very well. Gina teaches far and wide, from here all the way to Netanya in the Sharon area. She gives shurim and chaburot all around town. And Gina, it's a real pleasure to have you here this evening. So we look forward to hearing your insights on the Haggadah. With no further ado, Gina Junger.
Thank you, Rav Bendavid. Thank you, Mayor, for asking me to participate with so many wonderful speakers tonight. Our children in the Gan Yeladim learn a wonderful song, and the song goes something like this: Simcha Rabba, Aviv Higia Pesach Ba. What are our children being taught? They are taught that we welcome two things with great joy. We welcome Chag Pesach and we welcome the spring. And with both of these things, we recognize that there is Simcha Rabba. There is great joy. I know some of you ladies are not feeling it right now, but Simcha Rabba, that's how we're supposed to approach the upcoming holiday. This holiday actually has 4 different names. And the ones that we're more familiar with, of course, are Chag Pesach, the holiday of the Pesach sacrifice, Chag Matzot, the holiday of the Matzot, Zman Cherutenu, the time of our freedom, which is what we will add in our tefillot and in Birkat HaMazon. But I want to focus tonight on Chag Aviv, the festival of spring. The Torah actually tells us that this is so important twice, once in Sefer Shmot and also in Sefer Dvarim. It speaks about the importance of Chag Pesach and its connection to the spring. Hayom atem yotzim b'chodesh Aviv, Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Jewish people. Today you are going out in the month of the spring. And in Sefer Dvarim, Shamor et chodesh Aviv, observe the month of the spring. V'asita Pesach l'Hashem Elokecha, and you should keep the Passover to Hashem your God. Ki b'chodesh Aviv hotziacha Hashem Elokecha mimitzrayim laila. Because Hashem has brought you out of Egypt in the springtime. We see that the Torah emphasizes the connection between this holiday and the spring. Not only that, the Torah says Shamor et chodesh Aviv, and the idea of Shamor is very interesting. It means that the Sanhedrin has an obligation to adjust the calendar to ensure that Pesach will always fall in the springtime. And as the lunar year is about 11 days shorter than the solar year, a leap year every 2 or 3 years, specifically the month of Adar, make sure that Pesach always falls in spring. This concept of Ibur Hashanah, of making sure that Pesach falls in the springtime, is so important. As a matter of fact, our brethren, Muslim brethren, also have a lunar calendar, but they don't make sure, right, that the solar calendar and the lunar calendar are in sync, and therefore Ramadan can fall sometimes in winter and sometimes in summer. We ensure that Pesach will always fall in the spring. Now the question is, why is spring so important? Rashi quotes the Midrash and gives us a fascinating answer. Rashi says, "B'chodesh Aviv, Hashem took us out in the month of spring. V'chi lo hayu yodim be'ezeh chodesh." And did the Jewish people not know in which month? All they had to do was to look around. Ela ko amar lahem Moshe. This is what Moshe said to the Jewish people. Ra'u chesed shigmalchem. Look at the tremendous benevolence, the goodness that Hashem did for you. Shotzi otchem b'chodesh shehu kasher latzet. That he took you out in a month where it was appropriate to go out. Lo chama velo tzina velo gshamim. Chodesh shehu kasher latzet. A month in which it's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's not raining. It's perfect time for going out of Egypt. It sounds to me like the Goldilocks story, honestly. It sounds to me like this bed is too hard, this bed is too soft, this bed is just right. What is the Midrash coming to say? The Midrash is coming to say that Hashem thought carefully about the time of year that he was going to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. He wanted it not to be too hot and not to be too cold, but rather that it should be just right, like Goldilocks said. And why? Why is this so important? Well, first of all, Hashem did not want the Jewish people to complain about the weather. He wanted them to understand that this is the perfect time of year, not too hot and not too cold. Now, why is this so important? It's so important because we know as the story unfolds after Yetziat Mitzrayim that the Jewish people will complain about everything. They will complain about the man, and they will complain about the lack of water, and they will complain about the meat. But the one thing the Jewish people will never complain about is the weather. Isn't that fascinating? Yes, is the one thing they don't complain about. But we have to understand that obviously there's something deeper here, and that is the connection between two themes, and that is freedom and spring. And these two things go hand in hand. During the winter, we've been closed into our homes. The trees are bare, the nights are cold and dark. And when spring arrives, suddenly we feel liberated, both physically and emotionally. Finally, we can go out. Finally, we see the buds on the trees. We see the flowers blossoming. And as nature is reborn, so the Jewish people are led from slavery to freedom. And actually, it is our birthday. If we would think about what Yetziat Mitzrayim represents, we would say it's our birthday. Now, how is this connection to Chodesh Aviv expressed? It's expressed in many different ways. First of all, we have the mitzvah Birkat HaIlanot, and it's a wonderful opportunity from the first of Chodesh Nisan to go out and bless on the fruit trees that are blossoming, And what do we say in this bracha? We say that Hashem created briot tovot v'idanot tovot. Hashem created good trees, le'enot behem bnei adam, for us to enjoy. So first of all, when we stand next to the tree, we have a tremendous opportunity, not only to feel the spring, but to smell the blossoms, and also to hear the buzzing of the bees, right? All of these things are a reminder that spring is truly in the air. The next thing we have, the other opportunity to remember the spring, is the karpas on our Seder plate. Now, the rabbis give very many varied reasons for the karpas. The first, of course, is technical, and that is that we need to have a bracha of borei pri adama, because later on, when we eat the maror, we will not repeat the bracha of borei pri adama, and therefore it's important for us to have a borei pri adama bracha, right? And we will say, we will keep in mind the maror that we will eat later. Another reason is so that our children will ask questions, but nowadays, perhaps our children are smarter than anything, and their teachers have taught them well. So perhaps that's not reason enough. And lastly, to remind us of the spring. Ideally, the karpas should be a vegetable. Sorry. I've lost mine.
Gina, you there?
Yes, sorry, my camera. Thank you. The karpas. Ideally, the karpas should be a vegetable that reminds us of the spring. The truth is, though, the best thing would be if the karpas would be a vegetable, which is a bracha borei pri adama, and also would remind us of the spring, and therefore, in a sense, it would cover both opinions, right? To have the bracha borei pri adama and also be a reminder of spring. I am very sorry to tell you folks that a boiled potato does not really fit this description. Now, I am not for any reason saying chas v'shalom that we should do away with the boiled potato. It's a very strong minhag. But the truth is that the reason is because, especially in Eastern Europe, it was very difficult for people to find fresh vegetables. So perhaps what I'm suggesting is we can keep the boiled potato on our Seder plates, and next to it should be a vegetable which reminds us of the spring. And that perhaps would be, right, a more spring-like vegetable next to the potato, and that way we could actually do both. Another reminder of spring that we have on Chag HaPesach is Shir HaShirim. This beautiful song, this beautiful poem that we read, specifically connected to Chag HaPesach, is a reminder of the spring. Hanitzanim niru ba'aretz, Etta zamir higia, v'kol hator nishma be'artzenu. The times of the rains have passed, the time of the songbirds has arrived, and the blossoms can be seen throughout the land. And it beautifully describes Shir HaShirim, the spring which is all around us. And finally, on the first day of Pesach, we stop praying for rain, and we begin to say, Morit Hatad. We have a prayer for dew. And this again is a reminder that the winter has passed, and it's really indeed now spring. But truthfully, especially since we are a keilah of olim from many different countries, I have to be honest, and I have to say in this forum, it's not spring everywhere. That's the truth. And my student who made Aliyah from Toronto recalls that her father would carry her on his shoulders because the sidewalks were covered in snow during Chag HaPesach. And she actually said that when the Ganenet asked, does anybody know, how do we know that Pesach is arriving? And the 4-year-old granddaughter raised her hand and said, because it's snowing outside. So it's true that it's not spring everywhere, but that's another wonderful opportunity and reminder that we have. And that is the special connection that we have living here in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, it is spring. It's Aviv. All we need to do is go outside. And the truth is, we should be extremely grateful to be able to celebrate as the Torah instructed us to do, and not at a time where there's snow on the ground, but truly where we see the trees are blossoming, the songbirds are singing, and the world is coming back to life after a very cold winter. After a year of lockdowns, confinements to 1 kilometer from our house, let us embrace these two concepts, freedom and spring. And let's remember that spring brings with it always hope. The Gemara in Masechet Rosh Hashanah says, "Benisan nigalu, benisan atitim lehigael." Our forefathers were redeemed in Nisan, and in the future, redemption will be in Nisan as well. So may we merit to really see the end of the galut, the end of this long winter, and to see the spring of our people. B'me'ara b'yameinu. Wishing everyone a Chag Aviv Sameach.
Okay. Thank you so much, Gina. Beautiful, beautiful words of Torah. I'm going to conclude this evening with a short idea. I just want to share last night, I was giving a shiur to an eclectic group of people with a mixed background, some observant, some not so observant. And we had a discussion about the Haggadah. And one woman actually piped up and said something quite provocative, that she said, well, the Haggadah is a deeply flawed text. It's a deeply flawed text because there are no women mentioned in the Haggadah. And my immediate response was to say, well, it's lasted for 2,000 years. That clearly, it's hard to say it's so flawed. It's been a bestseller. People have written dissertations and PhDs on the Haggadah. My second response, which I was also thinking about, was, well, guess who else is not mentioned in the Haggadah? There's some very important personalities who are left out of the Haggadah. For example, Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe is mentioned by passing, Vayaminu b'Hashem is Moshe Avdo. He doesn't appear in the Haggadah. Aharon hardly makes it into the Haggadah when we sing Hallel, Beit Aharon B'Tchu b'Hashem. That's it. There are some male personalities who make it into the Haggadah. Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon. Avraham Avinu has 4 or 5 mentions. Yitzchak, Yaakov has 10, probably the most. But the truth is that if you look at the Haggadah as a totality, there are actually no personalities in the Haggadah. The focus really is on Hashem's Geulah, Hashem's redemption, in contrast to human beings who play a secondary role in that process. They're tools, but really God is the one who's orchestrating the redemption. And but then I said, you know what? Let me think about this. Why is it that there are no women in the Haggadah? And I think it's a real question, and a question that needs to be thought about. And I want to share with you my own thoughts on this. This might be the answer. It could be just a answer, but I think it's worth thinking about. When I was growing up, we used to have Seder Pesach with a family called the Kolbs. And the Kolbs were very good friends of ours, best friends. And we shared many Pesachs together. We used to also go skiing with them and hiking and camping. And unfortunately, the mother of this family, her name was Levy Kolb, who was very, very close friends with my mother. She unfortunately was taken from us when she was a young mother, 35 years old, mother of 4 kids. And it was a terrible tragedy. This is the first time I was in, I think it was 8th grade at the time, that I had experienced loss and grief. And this is really a tragedy for my parents' chevra. And I remember sitting around the table that Libby, Zichronah Livracha, would always share the following Dvar Torah. This is the only, she would always share this from year to year. My mother continues to share it at the Seder. And I'm sure many of you have thought about this before, that when it comes to the She'eno Yodea Lish'ol, the child who doesn't know how to ask, it says, At Titachlo. You should answer him. Shene'amar v'higadol avincha bayom hahu lemor. We don't wait for the child to ask. We start to teach. We respond, and we say, Ba'avur zeh hasash li b'tzeiti mi'mitzrayim. Now, this word at is interesting. At is normally lashon nekeva. Now, from a grammatical standpoint, sometimes at could also mean lashon zachar. In today's daf yomi, in fact, at appears clearly in a male context in Masachet Shkalim, daf bet amud aleph. But at could also, of course, mean feminine. And Libby's Dvar Torah from year to year went as follows. This is the mother. This is the mother teaching her child. The father is at work. The father's not at the home. This is the mother who nurtures her child, whose job it is to raise the children in the home. And that's what she would say from year to year. And my mother continues this tradition of quoting this in her name. Now, over the last few years, just studying different Haggadot, I realized that this is not, it's a beautiful idea. It's not Levy Kolb's own chidush. This is actually something that many commentators on the Haggadah quote. Rav Chaim Palachi in his Haggadah quotes this idea. Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, Rav Ruvain Margoliot quote this idea that at is actually referring to the mother who plays an integral role in the education of her children. And I'll just point out, just to sharpen the question, there's no doubt that women play an integral and essential role in the redemption from Mitzrayim. In the first parak of Mitzrayim, there are no men mentioned. It's Shifra and Puah and Miriam and Yochevet and Bat Paro in the first two prakim, who are playing a critical role in the redemption of the Jewish people. Furthermore, Chazal get this. Chazal know that women are the central characters in the story. Bizchut nashim tzadkaniyot, the Gemara teaches us in Masechet Sotah. So what's happening here? I want to suggest the following answer. The nature in which women help to redeem the Jewish people in Mitzrayim is not through an established, position of authority. No one appoints Miriam or Yochevet or even Shifran Puah to become leaders. They choose within a particular context to exercise leadership, to take responsibility, to stand up, to have courage, to make something happen in a moment of crisis. There's no official position, there's no title, there's no prestige. It's just about standing in and making something happen when something needs to be done. This is the type of leadership that these women display in Sefer Shemot, and this is where women appear in the Haggadah. They appear in the Haggadah as filling in, as teachers, as standing in. There's a child who doesn't know anything about the story. At petachlo, you fill in that space. You make sure that child knows about the Exodus story. You make sure that this child is educated and connected to the tradition. It's a leadership, again, that's not based on a position of official authority, but it's about exercising leadership. It's about filling in the spaces, filling in the voids, making sure that something happens when there's no one to take a stand, when there's no one to stand up and be courageous and do what has to get done. The She'ena Yodea Lishol symbolizes the voids in our lives when we need people to step up. And I think that this year of Corona has really brought out in many of us in our community and beyond this element of leadership, this idea that don't wait for something to happen. Don't wait to call up that friend who needs a call, or that person who's in bidud who needs a meal, or that person who's struggling because they have a family member who they can't get to. Don't wait for that call. Don't wait for that official, tap on the shoulder. You have to fill in the void. You have to make it happen. You have to step in. At petachlo. This is the type of leadership that women demonstrate in Sefer Shemot. And this is what the Haggadah is sort of beckoning all of us, women of course, but all of us to take on this type of leadership. At petachlo. Fill in the void and make something happen. And Baruch Hashem, we're very blessed as a community that we have so many people have taken on leadership during this period, filling in the void, doing chesed and teaching and connecting and bringing people together. And I just want to end off with a thank you, that this is what an amazing program we put together here with educators from Shivtei and as well as lay members. And everybody delivered insightful and thought-provoking Divrei Torah, and it just makes me so proud to see our community come together and share in Torah for the share insights for Pesach. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we will all sit around the table and share some of these insights with our families, with our friends, and with our neighbors. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we should be blessed to experience a true Geula this Chag Pesach. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you again to Meir for organizing this program, and Chag Kasher v'Sameach l'Kulam. Okay, and we're going to send out the recording. So
thank you.
Tov l'Kulam. Thank you so much. And,
excellent. Excellent. Really
Thank you very much.
Thank you to all the speakers.
Thank you very much, Laila Tov.
Okay, Laila Tov, everybody. Laila Tov,
Thank you
for participating.
2 thumbs up to everybody.
Thank you very much. It was excellent.